My name is Frances. I'm co-founder of Key Acceleration, and I'm really excited to bring to you today another episode of Women in Blazers, our podcast that is designed to highlight women that, especially in finance, that have been able to trailblaze their way into seats of position, power, authority. For women, it's often a difficult challenge that we have in order to have a seat at the table, to be invited into the boardrooms, to have equal pay. And so excited to be bringing in women that can share their successes, their challenges, and the journey to get to where they are. And so with me today, I'm with Karen King, who is the founder and CEO of Fronterra Global, a financial advisory firm. Thank you so much, Karen, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So to start off, and we'll talk about your company in a bit, I'd love to talk a little bit about your career journey.
Sure.
So now you own and founded a company, and you've had a number of different experiences working for large companies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what led you from the early days to where you are now, building your own company? Did you always know that that was going to be the path and journey? Maybe talk
I would say definitely not. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I'd say I've always been fairly risk adverse in my career and my life. When I was in college, I studied economics and Spanish, and that was the closest I could get to an international business major at liberal arts college. And I just knew I wanted to do something international. I loved languages. I studied many languages. I wanted to use my Spanish, but I just didn't know exactly what that would look like. So post-college, I ended up moving to Spain. I worked there for a year. I moved to Australia and worked there. And then finally I came home back to the East Coast, and I said, okay, I need a real job. I need a salary and an income. And I had my eyes set on New York City. So I actually applied for an entry-level job at Ernst & Young. And I found this practice called Customs and International Trade. And I really didn't know what it was about, except that it said international, and that sounded cool to me. And I was, 20-something years old. And so I joined as an entry-level staff. Quite immediately, I realized it was a very technical and niche space, huge learning curve. But it was kind of a cool intersection of, compliance and customer service with an international focus. So it kind of was the right mix for me. And I stayed on. I moved up the ranks. I ended up staying there for 10 years. While I was there, I sat for the exam to become a licensed customs broker. And so I kind of started out my career there. And like I said, I was there for 10 years. And then after 10 years, I kind of hit this inflection point of feeling like I needed to make a change.
And so then founding your own company.
Yes. And again, I wasn't, I didn't have my sights set on this is going to be it. I considered going in-house at big tech and, being an advisor on the client side. And then this opportunity popped up where a friend introduced me to a friend of hers who had just started up her own small boutique consulting firm. Wow. And she was looking for folks to partner with. But it was so small, she wasn't ready to take on clients. So we talked for months. We kind of formed a plan that, I would contract to her, but I needed to be in parallel starting my own business. So it kind of just happened, and I fell into entrepreneurship, a little bit by chance.
As many of us do.
Yes.
Not always intended.
Right.
How different does it feel from, working at a big company like EY to now going out on your own, where, you talked earlier about having to learn these really complex finance things kind of off the cuff through the journey. What are some of the learnings that you've had now as an entrepreneur that you've maybe had to learn on the job?
Yeah, I'd say it's been a huge learning curve too, just in a different way. Like at EY, it was more in the technical space, and I had to become an expert on international trade and tariffs and customs. And then becoming an entrepreneur, it's all these things that you never thought about when you're an employee. Like, how do I run my business? How do I become my own, tech? I'm my own IT tech person. I'm my own ops person, my own accountant and finance. And it's all these things that you need to learn to figure out for yourself. Of course, reaching out and getting help as needed, but it's kind of a totally different learning curve being on your own and really being your own boss and having to figure it out. No one's telling you, as you know, like no one's telling you what to do next or how to do it. So I'm really leaning on, fellow entrepreneurs too. Like I said, the woman I partnered with when I left EY was a great resource to me in helping me, guide me, okay, use this attorney, okay, work with this person for insurance and getting set up.
Yep, community and network matters so much as a founder.
Yes.
And now I'd love to maybe focus a little bit more on the business. So Fronterra Global, what are your main focuses for the business? What is the clientele that you're serving? And how did you start to define what those things would be for the business?
Yeah, so it is very similar to the work I did at Ernst & Young. It's in the international trade space. So I help companies advise them on imports and exports in a couple different spaces. The first is compliance. There's tons of rules and regulations around importing and exporting. In the news right now, everyone's hearing tariffs. So that's one small piece of, rules and regulations about bringing a good across the border into the U.S. I also really like to do the strategy piece. So it's like helping companies figure out how they should be setting up their operations, how they could minimize tariffs. There's lots of different tools that are available to do some planning and like tax minimization essentially. And then I really love to get into data analysis and helping companies look at the data on their imports and exports and analyze that for trends and help them make decisions for their future growth.
Fantastic. Right now, since it is so topical, and we do have a lot of foreign founders that are listeners to our podcast, what would you recommend them from a tariffs perspective, or maybe there's other sort of global trade things that maybe aren't being talked about as much that you feel like founders really should be paying attention to right now?
Certainly tariffs are top of mind for everyone. So if you're a founder and you're looking to start a business that has anything to do with a good crossing an international border, especially with the U.S., you need to be looking into this. I'd say a year ago, it might have been kind of back burner, like get the product off the ground, and then you'll kind of figure out those pieces to, the final landed cost of getting this product into the U.S. Now, I'm really encouraging everyone to do that upfront planning because it could be the difference between making a profit or not. Or maybe even choosing where you're bringing that product in from. If you're going to bring a product in from China right now, you could be facing tariffs up to, 30, 50, 60%. Wow. And if you're not doing that planning up front, it's just an awful surprise to have your first box and shipment. You're so excited to, get into the country and you want to get it onto shelves, and then you're stuck with this huge bill at the border, and that's really
not good for any business trying to
exactly.
be successful.
So I'm really encouraging, especially small businesses where that is such a huge impact. Huge businesses, it's still a big impact, but they can ride this wave. If you're a small company looking to start up and you don't have that planning in place, it could kind of tank things from the beginning. So I'm working with a lot of small businesses right now just to get that figured out before they do even the first step.
It's amazing, and I'm sure a lot of businesses right now especially need your services at the moment. And then going back a bit to your journey, finance, especially these highly complex, so trade, etc., is a very male-dominated industry. It has been for a long time. How have you found navigating that as a woman entrepreneur, a woman in business, and are there ways that you have been able to establish yourself as, a leader in this, which you are, that has helped set you apart?
I have to say, so when I first started at EY out of my career, I was really lucky to work with and for many women. So it was great. Just from the beginning, I had, women supervisors that I reported to. So it was great to have those mentors from the very start. I would say as I moved up to, as you kind of start to move up the ranks in big corporations, I did see kind of a drop off at higher levels. When I made manager and you go to your new manager training, and it was probably maybe about 50-50. And then a couple years later, promotion to senior manager, and you go to the new senior manager training, and it was probably about 25% women. And then looking up, at a place like EY and the Big Four, it's a partnership. So And that's the top level. And when I was looking at that partnership level, there were really fewer and fewer women. Of course there were, but really not as many as there should have been, especially looking at women, who also were having a family, which was something I aspired to as well. So, when I was making that decision to stay or leave, I had a conversation with a very senior, partner at Ernst & Young, and asked him a very pointed question about women in leadership.
What was the question?
When it was so long ago, I don't remember the exact question, but I remember I highlighted that there weren't a lot of, examples, and what were they doing in that space. And I didn't get a very reassuring answer. I think it was always, of course, many companies want to get more female leaders, but unfortunately, at the very top ranks, there just aren't as many. And hopefully it's better now. Like I said, I've been out on my own for 10 years.
Yep.
And the cool thing is now I partner with mostly women. So fellow entrepreneurs, fellow consultants, and we work together on projects. A lot of even part-time consultants and women who probably wouldn't have been in the workforce otherwise because they maybe didn't want to or couldn't take on a full-time role. But being able to be a consultant in a part-time capacity has been kind of the perfect combination for some of my colleagues, and be able to have that balance.
Entrepreneurship does provide you a lot more flexibility in terms of your ability to also manage your schedule.
Right.
So you can have a family and also build your business.
Exactly.
That's incredible. I would love to kind of understand a bit more about your feelings in entrepreneurship now. Have you felt like, you're collaborating with a lot of women? Do you ever feel still like there's some of that glass ceiling aspect that you talked about in corporate, or, when it comes to working with clients or building trust, or have you found like it's much easier so long as you're continuing to immerse yourself in the right networks?
That's a great question. I do think, at least in my experience, it's been easier because it's not that rigid structure of, you move up the ranks and there's this, top tier that you need to get to. It just feels like it's more flexible. And so, I think folks hire me for my expertise, and there's not necessarily that glass ceiling because I'm my own boss, right?
Yep.
But not to say it doesn't exist at all, but I do think it's been, a nicer
great change.
Experience.
Yeah. What would be some maybe advice to a woman that would be either your younger self or to someone that maybe is looking to change out of sort of more of a corporate type job and take a risk to build their own business and build their own path? What would you have wanted to be told at that period of time?
Yes. Well, one, I'd say always there's community, as you mentioned, joining some networks. At Ernst & Young, I was in the Professional Women's Network. I've also been for about the past 20 years it's called the Organization of Women in International Trade. I'm now on the board of the New York chapter.
Amazing.
So just kind of finding that community and women who can support you and just, if you have an idea or if you have a question, to be able to go to someone. I find that these types of groups are so supportive and everyone really wants to help you out. I've even found colleagues and fellow, work friends through that. I would also say, I wrote down a little quote here when I was thinking about this. So, if it feels too hard to do it, it just means the first step is not small enough. So, I think sometimes people feel like maybe kind of what I did is you quit your full-time job and you're jumping full-time into entrepreneurship, but it can actually be smaller. You could start a side gig, or you could just take a class in something you're interested in, even just to start thinking about it. And if you're interested in maybe getting off that corporate path, to start exploring it maybe in a smaller, safer way than feeling like you have to go all or nothing. What else? And I was also thinking about this. I do think women sometimes could tend to be a little bit more risk adverse compared to men. I know I certainly was, so I kind of needed that push to go out on my own. But I do think, I do encourage women to think about it, because while there are risks, as you mentioned, the benefits can be so large. Of course, it's really hard work, but like you can design your own job, you can design your own life, you can have some more flexibility. So while it's scary to take that risk, it's also really nice to be thinking about those benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell women that owning a business is an asset.
Yeah.
And, it's something that you can sell.
Yes,
and that you're building
absolutely.
for yourself, and it's a great way to also find wealth and flexibility and all of that. And I love the quote of if
it feels too hard to do, it means the first step is not small enough.
That's such a great quote, because I think it takes some of the fear out of, hey, this is a big life change. It's like, maybe go take a class, maybe go to an entrepreneurship meetup, networking, and talk to other entrepreneurs, see how get inspired. So I think that that's a really important point. It doesn't have to be everything at once. Life is not a race.
Right. And it's not my quote, it's something I heard, but when I hear quotes I like, I have this little section on my phone where I write them down. So that one came to me when I was thinking about this question.
Yeah, that one's gonna stick with me. I'll attribute to you as the one that told me.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for being with us today and sharing your insight and expertise and your journey with us. So we hope that you tune in next time for another Women in Blazer podcast. Thank you everyone for joining and listening in.